Hello, Alabama fans, and welcome to the BOL Recruiting Show. I'm BOL publisher Tim Watts. Terrible. And with me is Andrew Bone, recruiting editor extraordinaire. Big weekend. I mean, pretty excited. You wait for these official visitors, and Andrew, we talked. I mean, I think the funniest thing in hindsight, and I'm never going to let it go, was the can this staff recruit? Can they recruit? Can they recruit the South? Like the South was totally different. It's a little different. But the one thing we've seen from day one last year in the spring, through the officials, through the signing, these guys have personalities. And when these kids talk, with Nick Saban, they talked about Nick Saban. He was just such a big fish, the big closer, the best ever. But when you get these guys one on one with an assistant coach, an area coach, they just rant and rave about the visits.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, looking back at all of our conversations with different recruits, different parents, coaches, a lot of them kind of say the same thing. Talking to different players on the team and how much they love the coaching staff. And you kind of saw, throughout the spring, none of these guys entered the transfer portal. This is Coach DeBoer's football team, and these are guys who want to be in Tuscaloosa. And you saw this past weekend, a lot of photos, videos with guys like Keelan Russell, Ryan Williams, Justin Hill. A lot of guys were really active in trying to help recruit all of these players to Tuscaloosa, and the feedback was certainly really positive. Now, let's be real, Alabama's not getting every single player that was in Tuscaloosa this past weekend for official visits, but all of the positive vibes, all the positive things that came out of the weekend, I think really kind of set the tone for these next 3 weeks heading into these, the final visits. So a lot of excitement after this weekend, and a lot of positivity.
I mean, that personality stands out. We could go basically every coach, you hear them brag about how close they are with them and how close they stay in touch with them. But, shout out to the social media team. I mean, the photos are great. They do the videos, they're great. All of that's super popular. Kids love it now. I mean, the video, the photo, the Letterman jacket is outstanding.
And
They
they're,
come
and
up with,
they're different. It's not just one photo
yes, that's
or one backdrop that you're posting.
variety.
They're doing a lot of different ones, which are cool, and some might be a little, I wouldn't say cheesy, but some people don't like. But there's a lot of them that they do like, and they're able to show those off. And I think the media team, the graphics team, have done a really great job these last 2 years.
We know last year was the hockey jerseys. I mean,
Yeah.
I imagine they jacked the sales up on those things pretty good. This year, the Letterman jacket, I think that's a Mustang. I'm not a car guy, but the old car looks fantastic. Everything's good. So we had a pretty extensive list all week on BamaOnline.com. And for you guys watching the show, do us a favor, hit that like and subscribe button. Let us know you like this content. We're going to bring it more to you more consistently. Took a little bit of a hiatus after the season, but we're back now. Want to make sure you guys like what we're doing, and gals. But Andrew, I mean, a big visitors list. You had the running back from Texas fall off the visitors list. Not a complete surprise. He kind of popped up. Catch us up on exactly how that went down. You're on top of it from the start, but he was the only one who didn't show up.
Yeah, it was kind of funny how it changed really quickly. KJ Edwards out of Carthage High School in Texas received an offer back in, I think it was February. Never visited Alabama before, never really mentioned them as a contender. That Alabama coach Gillespie, running backs coach, went out and saw him during the spring, but still, we never really heard anything about him taking a trip to Tuscaloosa. Then all of a sudden, the week of, he decided that he was going to come in for an OV. And then on Thursday or Friday, we learned that he wasn't going to visit. So, not really that big of a deal. I don't think we ever saw him as a realistic target. He had a
Yeah.
top 4 or 5. Alabama was probably number 5, and maybe even below that. But
Oof.
hey, not really surprised that he canceled the visit. And Alabama's obviously got some big running back targets that they've recruited really heavily throughout the process, and we're going to see some of those guys on campus a little later on this month.
And sometimes you just get to that point when somebody pops up for a visit, you want to gauge how serious they are from the Alabama end, and you start talking NIL numbers and everything else, and that can fall through. But I think it was 13.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Uh, another thing that people, sometimes these visits get canceled. A lot of people don't realize this, that they want to bring in a lot of different guys. And I'm not saying that KJ Edwards was doing this, but you are limited to a certain number of people that you can bring in for official visit weekends that the school is going to pay for. And then some of these kids, they want to bring 10 different family members, 15 different family
Yeah.
members. And, sometimes you will see, larger groups that are going to come in, but most of the time it's not going to happen. So those are some situations where we see some kids do cancel visits.
When we see the big groups, it's usually in state or drivable. Like Reuben Foster showed up with 75 people. Zion Gibson showed up with the whole family. He had double digit people here, but that's usually everyone driving and all. Coming out of state when you're taking a flight, much harder to do, much more expensive. So the final numbers were 13 official visits, one unofficial visit. Let's start talking about Jep Tamala, a guy I really like, sort of popped up, quarterback committed to Iowa State. Was blown away. All the feedback was blown away. Has kind of seen his recruitment go from 0 to pretty close to 100 pretty quickly. I mean, he committed to Iowa State. Missouri pushed hard. Alabama came in and offered. Ohio State still recruiting. A lot of schools are interested in him. Big guy, athletic, plays basketball. Unofficial visit, they knocked it out of the park with him. He's got an official visit lined up for Iowa State. And after that, we'll figure out what he's going to do.
Yeah, so Alabama offered two quarterbacks on May the 15th. It was Jet Tamala and Matt Ponatowski. And Matt's going to be in this weekend for an official visit.
Yep.
So, the biggest question right now with Jet is he going to come back to Tuscaloosa for an official? He's going to Iowa State this weekend for the OV. You can expect they are going to try to prevent another trip to Tuscaloosa because, and we've talked about this, if another trip to Tuscaloosa happens for an official visit, that's got to be very detrimental to Iowa State's chances in keeping him in the class. So really intrigued to kind of see how that shakes out. Blake Byler at Bama Online had a great interview with Jet that's posted on there this morning. So go check that out. But, he certainly seemed to have a really good time. Alabama is kind of an eye-opening experience for a lot of these kids that come to Tuscaloosa for the first time, especially from the Midwest. So really intrigued to kind of see how his visit with Iowa State goes this weekend, if he decides to shut it down or, like I said, if he decides to make a trip back to T-Town.
And the thing with Tamala's recruitment, and we'll move on after this, is that he's from Nebraska. He's right in the middle of the heart of Nebraska, kind of probably in Omaha, was probably expecting to end up in Nebraska, if we're being honest. Took the most visits there. Outside of Nebraska, he hasn't been to many places. So even Iowa State, looking at the database of his visit, he's taken it on 3.com. He's really still experiencing this for the first time. So, I think it's going to come down to heart versus head in this one. I think that Bama overwhelms a lot of prospects, especially coming from the smaller school. But Iowa State was there early, though. We've seen this go both directions. So we'll figure it out and see how it goes this weekend. We hope to have more information. We will have more information after that. So, Andrew, pick a guy, any guy that Bama, in your opinion, made the biggest move with. Who do you say? And you don't have to be too specific, but who do you feel Bama did the most work with this weekend? There's actually several candidates, right? This isn't usually when you go into these visits, there's a choice or two, and me and you will be battling for that main guy we want. But hey, pick your poison here. There's plenty to go around.
I'll go offense. I'm gonna let you go defense in that secondary because I know somebody that we just talked about one of the guys who has the same first name, but I think Malachi Lee, the big offensive lineman from Honolulu, had great visit, and we talked about this last week, and we talked about this a lot on BOL. Felt like Michigan, Georgia, had really kind of put themselves in that top two race heading into the weekend, and then Alabama just absolutely blew it out of the park with this monster lineman from Hawaii, and his family brought his entire family, brothers, sisters, both of his parents. And I thought what Alabama did that really kind of stood out was bringing Tua's parents in for the weekend to be around them. And they had been talking. This wasn't just a spur of the moment, let's bring Tua's family down and let them talk. They've been talking for the last month or two, really ever since Malachi made that trip to Tuscaloosa back in March. And yeah, I think they did a really good job, spending time with them, kind of telling them about Tuscaloosa, churches and stuff like that. So that was something that really stood out. But I think the relationships with the coaching staff has certainly continued to improve. One thing that Malachi told me was the relationship he has with Will Sanders, Alabama's interior offensive lineman, who an in-state kid, guy who loves Alabama. Was told they really hit it off well, and that's a guy that he's connected with more so than just about anybody, at any school throughout this entire process. So I think Alabama did a great job there. Still going to take these visits coming up. Decision probably after OVs, but I think Alabama, if they're not in the top two, I certainly think that they are on an even playing field, with those other two schools right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I know, of course, we'll go. I'm going to sear off just a little bit and go with Nolan Wilson. I think the little bit more eye-opening. I mean, very good relationship with Freddie Roach. And Alabama fans, if y'all are not happy this year, I'm done with you. The Alabama defensive line has been a priority. Y'all cannot gripe. You cannot say anything. They are in with several guys. It was a good weekend. Brought in some major talent guys we're going to talk about, J.J. Finch, Titan Davis, other guys. Plus, they've got 2 committed. So I'm going to go with Nolan Wilson because I think we pulled back the curtain a little bit and saw there's some emotional ties there, family members that want him to go there. He's a big-time football player. Got to pull him out of Mississippi, which is always somewhat of a chore. But kids do leave Mississippi. I just don't think some fans know it, but they do actually leave. But he's a guy that we saw the parents are okay with him leaving, actually maybe prefer him to experience some things out of state. And we were told wants him to be out of state, but wants him to be not too far away. That kind of sounds like Tuscaloosa. We've got some people telling us Miami's going to make a push, but Nolan really opened up, didn't he? He really opened up, and you had a great interview with him. Tell us a little bit more about what Nolan said, because him to me was, hey, we want big offensive linemen, we want big defensive linemen. We got Malachi, we got Nolan, so 2 guys Bama's trending with.
Yeah, great interview with Nolan yesterday. It's going to post on BOL a little later today. But, he said, everybody's chasing Bama. They're definitely the team to beat. Loves the coaching staff. They were the first school to extend him an offer last fall. And, that relationship with Freddie Roach has continued to grow throughout this whole process. And, really felt like, Alabama's never been one of those fake schools that offered them early, then jumped on them a couple months later. They've been there from the get-go and have heavily recruited them since the start. So his brother is he told me yesterday, his brother is a diehard Alabama fan. He was really wanting him to go ahead and commit to Alabama this past weekend, but he wanted to hold off. He's wants to take these visits, enjoy the process a little bit more. Now, we do expect him to make a decision shortly after his final official visit, but Alabama did a great job with Nolan this weekend and really put them as the front runner heading into these next few weeks.
Let's talk about commitments, because I know some fans wanted them, and last year there was a certain push, but this year really resembles last year. I know that, like, when we see it discussed on the BOL roundtable, and again, you guys, if you're not on the roundtable, I mean, we can tell you that thing is hip hopping. We have continuous surprising threads. We had one last night, but a lot of discussion, a lot of recruiting going on, a lot of team going on. The Baron Phylon, who we haven't even talked about, popping up on was that a Wednesday night, like 10:30, 11 o'clock, whatever it was, out of the blue. So a lot of fun stuff happening on the roundtable. But sometimes it's discussed that Bama's off to a slow start this year. They actually have one more commitment than they did last year. And they, getting to the official visitors where this thing kicked off. Are you surprised? And I'll share my thoughts afterwards. There's not a ton of commitments Monday after an official visit.
Not really. I think talking to a lot of these guys, and you got to think, Alabama was certainly in uncharted territory last year when they were going into official visits. I don't think anybody really knew what was going to happen. Alabama had a lot of guys in the spring. And then once official visits started, they were able to pick up some guys pretty quickly. Keelan, you got Chuck McDonald, Mike Carroll, all those guys kind of committed within a few week time span. So those were some big pickups. But the relationships this year are a lot different than they were last year. A lot of them have been going on for over a year now, and Alabama feels like they know where they stand with a lot of these guys heading into officials after this past weekend, and then over the course of the next few weeks. We're not seeing a lot of commitments elsewhere either. It's not just in Tuscaloosa. I think USC is really the only school that seems to pick up, 10 commitments every single week. But, I think Alabama's completely fine with it. You don't want to miss out on these guys come late June and in July when they're making, all these top guys are making commitments, but we're not really seeing any of Alabama's priority targets that are jumping on board, not necessarily, at Alabama or at any other schools right now. So let this process play out over these next few weeks. You might get a commitment or two, but I don't necessarily see a wave of commits happening before official visits are complete for these guys.
Now, I will say, if you're old school recruiting guys, and shout out, me and Andrew love you more than any, 40 plus years doing this, you're used to a kid just committing, telling Andrew, telling me, the coach told us, one of us break it, the other one follow it with it. Y'all are used to that. Well, that is no longer how we do it. We now need a Hayes Fawcett edit. He's often overwhelmed. We need videos. We need photos. We need graphics from the schools. So committing on Saturday, that might happen. That might say, hey, I'm coming. But there's still a process to get to the actual commitment that goes public. Andrew and I, we don't really believe in silent commitments. I don't really know many coaches that really believe in them. Nick Saban believed in him because nobody really lied to him except for Tony Connor. He misled Nick. But that was a different story. I digress. So let's talk a little bit more about some of the visitors, Andrew. We touched on the defensive line. Now let's talk about Jet. We don't want to get too late into talking about Jet Washington, Kobe's nephew, an incredible looking athlete. I mean, he is tall. I mean, he's taller than Dijon. That's the thing with Alabama. You look at these kids most of these guys should kind of look like shrimps next to Dijon Lee, right? They should look short. Jet came in a little bit taller than Dijon, it looked like.
He's almost 6'5". I mean, that is a long, rangy safety. Yeah. I mean, you don't see many guys like that. I mean, he can move. I mean, he's really athletic. This is a guy that Alabama has recruited for such a long time. I mean, probably one of the longest guys that they've recruited since the start. But I'm intrigued to kind of see how this all shakes out because Jet had a great visit. Seemed to really connect with the Alabama players. Xavier Brown, Dijon Lee, those guys were around him throughout the entire weekend. I think they made him feel even more comfortable than he even has in the past. And he's been to Tuscaloosa a few times, so this was going to be a big visit for him. And it seems like they knocked it out of the park. Now he still has some big visits to go. Oregon still is that, it's the boogeyman. It seems like everybody on our board, they always worried that they're gonna drop that NIL bag. But we've seen plenty of kids that have chosen other schools over Oregon.
Oregon just had a kid jump in the pool with Dan Lanning and commit and decommit 2 weeks later.
That's wild, isn't it?
Remember when he dropped the video? We're talking about Richard Wesley committed. Him and Dan Lanning jumped in the pool together for a commitment video, and he decommitted a few weeks later. But when he did the video, Andrew and I were like, what happens if he decommits? I mean, that video's out there wherever school he ends up at. But anyways, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Andrew.
No, but I think they did a great job. Oregon's obviously going to be the biggest challenger. He's going to take officials to USC and Ohio State, but Alabama did a phenomenal job with Jet this weekend. They're going to have a pretty big safety on campus this weekend as well, and we'll talk about him in a minute. But yeah, I thought Bama did a fabulous job with Jet.
Yeah, and I mean, he's going to come down, not another guy, not in a rush. Now, the one thing when we talked about commitments earlier, we need to address is that at some point there could be a surge of commitments because Bama's choosing between this guy and that guy, this guy and that guy, this guy and that guy. And these schools, and it's not, we cover Alabama, obviously, so that's our focus, but it's not just Alabama. Georgia has to make decisions. Michigan has to, all these schools have to make decisions. Ideally, you want this thing done going into the season. Ideally, you want this done. And Bama did a good job of that last year. But also, I want to remind the Alabama fans that y'all screen for a commitment every day in late May to middle July, and somehow y'all damn got them. Y'all got commitments consistently, but then it was pretty quiet and y'all were pretty upset. So you don't want to open all your Christmas presents that fast. Andrew, let's talk about the defensive line. We hit on Nolan Wilson. Titan Davis came in. Kevin Ford, KJ Ford from Texas is a Wolf, could grow into a defensive lineman. Also brought in, who am I missing? JJ Finch from Indianapolis. So four possible defensive linemen. Let's talk about some of those guys. Start with Titan Davis.
Yeah, I had a chance to talk to Titans defensive line coach, recruiting coordinator, Coach Terrence Poe. Has been in Tuscaloosa with him before. Has really kind of helped him throughout this entire process. And he was in Tuscaloosa this past weekend with Titan's mom. Had a lot of positive things to say about the trip, and kind of going back to Tua's parents. He talked about how Tua's parents talked to not just Malachi Lee. They talked to the entire group that were in Tuscaloosa and talked to them about their experience coming all the way from Hawaii and being in a completely new environment, and how this community just kind of welcomes you in, and their whole experience. And that really spoke to Titan's mom. She really liked that a lot. Also had a really great conversation with Coach DeBoer's wife, who made her feel extremely comfortable. But they really like Alabama a lot. They've been to Tuscaloosa 3 times since March, and definitely expect him to make a decision maybe late June, early July. But I think Alabama is in a good spot with Titan Davis after this past weekend.
The thing about, if you've talked with Diane, Tua's mom, Talia's mom, she's a powerful speaker. She speaks from the heart. She's very emotional. I remember sitting down with them after the 2nd and 26. They're from the Alabaster area. Really hard not to pay attention to her. She really speaks from the heart. I can see her really connecting with the mom. It's not going to be very easy. And she's a very powerful woman. I mean, she's got to, not lose. The dad's very much the football guy. Helped a lot with the Thompson high school kids around here, really like a guru to them, and a mentor, not a guru, and helped them with Mark Freeman's program. But I can see that impact they have, because, they didn't leave. That was the talk. They moved to Alabama, and then they were just going to jet out the next day, the minute that was over. But obviously that meant something, that they've stayed around. So, JJ Finch is an interesting guy. I mean, you watch his film, he's definitely better than his ranking. Very active. He'll chase you down. He's not as long as some of the other guys, but he's going to grow into that nice sized prospect. He's from Steve Wilfong's neck of the woods, Indianapolis. Alabama's definitely in the mix. I think LSU's in there. But, I mean, the one thing Alabama's done with the defensive line I've liked the most recruiting is there's a lot of options. And that's the one thing this staff does well. Nick Saban did it as well. So we're not ever comparing staff. For the record, we think Saban's the GOAT. I think everybody thinks that. But what this staff does really well is they have a bunch of eggs for their basket. Like last year, when they got Latsier Brooks at wide receiver, they got Caleb Cunningham at wide receiver. And we said that's it. They want 2. And then they, what was his name? Lockhart, Tyler, went to Texas. The 5-star wide receiver Bama was involved with, and Derek Meadows.
Kalik
Lockett, and then Derek Meadows. They were like, can we get all 4? Well, a year later, what are they asking you, Andrew Bone? What are they asking you? Can we get 4?
Can we take 3 or 4 of these 5-star wide receivers? Can we take 3 or 4 of these 5-star defensive linemen? No, they can't. But they are going to try to, especially on the defensive line this year. Last year, they signed a small class. I think just 2 defensive linemen. This year, they knew it was going to be a priority. They're trying to sign 4 to 5 defensive linemen, and they've got a lot of really good options that it seems like Alabama is in that top 2, top 3 for. So with all of these guys, so it's going to be interesting to kind of see over the course of these next 3 or 4 weeks how that shakes out, with these guys, because I don't know if, one guy wants to jump on board. Is Alabama going to say, oh, let's wait a few minutes. Let's see, we need to wait until July, or we need to wait until after these official visits because these guys are coming in. How that dynamic's going to play out is going to be very interesting.
And they're not losing a lot at the wide receiver position for next season. After this coming season, they're not losing. We went through that. Horton's got another year. They're definitely going to lose Jeremy, but they have a talented room. Moving to the wide receivers, Andrew, you had a really good update with Booby Feaster. Interesting prospect, to say the least, and has got all the national attention you would expect from a guy like that.
Yeah, Booby made a trip back to Tuscaloosa, his second visit. Based on what we were seeing on social media, Friday and Saturday, it certainly, and even Sunday, it certainly seemed like he was having the time of his life, and spending a lot of time with Keelan Russell and Ryan Williams. Ryan was actually his official visit host, and spent a lot of time with him. Spent time with the coaching staff, but had a great visit. I mean, we talked to him last night. Got an in-depth interview with him on BOL right now, talking about his whole experience. But I think the biggest takeaway is he's been to so many different campuses throughout his entire recruitment, and not just this year, but last year, whether it's USC, LSU, Texas A&M, Texas, a lot of different schools. And he told me, he said, the one thing that really sticks out about Alabama is the culture is different than anywhere else I have ever been. They're just all locked in. Love the coaching staff. Love that the players on the team love the coaching staff. He said that was one thing that really stood out to me, was seeing all the different players. They could say whatever they wanted to. They had a players panel, just players and recruits, no parents, no coaches, nothing like that, where these guys could ask these players on the team anything they wanted about the program, about lifestyle, about the coaching staff, what it's really like to be a student athlete in Tuscaloosa. And, there was a lot of positivity about that, and really about the coaching staff and how everybody kind of gels with this staff extremely well. And obviously we saw that with, none of the guys leaving from or entering the transfer portal after the spring. You had some guys leave in December. How many of those guys were major impact guys on the team? Not very many. So these guys seem to be bought in with this staff, and they're letting it known to all these recruits who are making it to campus this month.
Last request, any of you guys watching or you gals, give us a like and subscribe. Let us know you like this content. It's the easiest way for us to keep doing it. It's the best way. Again, BamaOnline.com, the round table. Andrew and I are there answering questions nonstop, almost literally. One of us is always around there. Charlie Potter, Blake Byler, basketball, talking basketball, football, everything that's coming up. Welcome. There's some kind of trial. There's usually $1 for the first week. Love to have you on the round table, extension of kind of this show. We love doing the show. It's fun, but all the news hits there first. We had extensive nuggets yesterday morning, touching on basically all the prospects. But again, like and subscribe. We appreciate y'all. We know your time is valuable. We appreciate you sharing that time with us today. And before we get out of here, Andrew Bone, let's talk about a couple linebackers. Let's talk about Sincere Johnson. I mean, that's a name for a guy that's, it's the perfect name for a guy who's seemingly an Ohio State lock, who really seems like Bama, because our fans on the roundtable continue to say, is he sincere? So is he, Andrew?
I think so.
I agree.
Alabama had two of their top linebackers in town, with Sincere and Braden Rouse from Georgia. And Sincere is, he's one of those guys from Ohio, but at a program that is known to be a pipeline to Ohio State for years and years. There's a lot of pressure there. And Sincere's been one of those guys that Ohio State has known about, really since since his freshman year. So they've recruited him for a very long time. He's been to campus several times, but made it down to Tuscaloosa earlier this year for Junior Day, came back for the 8A weekend, and now has come back for his official visit. And Alabama is certainly going to be a major challenger to the Buckeyes. Now, Penn State's also in the race, but I do think it comes down to Alabama and Ohio State. I think they knocked it out of the park with him this weekend. Seemed to have a great time. Was around Justin Hill. Alabama signed him away from the Buckeyes last year. So there's a lot of positive momentum there with Sincere. Now, does that last? Got that official visit on June the 13th to Ohio State, which will last till the 15th, and he's announcing a decision on June the 19th, so 4 days after that trip to Ohio State, announcing that decision. I know it's going to be hard, but I think Alabama has certainly put themselves in a place where it wouldn't be a major surprise if he ended up at Alabama. But it's certainly going to be tough to get him out of Ohio this year.
He's went from an absolute Ohio State lock to us even discussing, him possibly not going to Ohio State. So that's a testament alone to the Alabama staff. I have to think he knows his decision now. He what's he going to see at Ohio State he's never seen? He's been there a dozen times. So I think he probably has a good feel one way or the other for that as far as Ohio State. I'm in program. He's coached by Ted again, senior. If you're old like Andrew, you remember his son could absolutely, scorch the earth. He was so fast at Ohio State, played in the NFL. So Braden Rouse, one I'm interested in, big time prospect, kind of more open than anybody else to some degree of the guys we're going to talk about before we get out of here. He feels more open than everybody else, Andrew, but Alabama certainly, and again, most official visits go well. Shout out to Reuben Foster. Most of them go well, but these go extremely well.
They do. I mean, you're never really going to have a player that's going to not have a lot of positive things, or a parent have a lot of positive things to say about an official visit, because that's what they're trying to do. They are trying to sell you on the program. They're trying to sign you. They're not trying to they're trying to make sure that you commit to their program, and they're going to do everything they possibly can. So Braden Rouse, guy that was offered in early January, around the same time, maybe even the same day as Sincere Johnson, by Coach Chuck Morrell, and that relationship has certainly grown throughout these last 6 months. And yeah, I think Alabama is certainly a top contender there. He has top 4 or 5. I think it's top 4 with Michigan and Tennessee, and Texas also in the hunt. I do think it comes down to Alabama and Tennessee and his recruitment. Been to both places several times now. Tennessee probably a little bit more, and there's always been some buzz on the Vol side with Braden Rouse, but Alabama has certainly made him feel like a top priority. Talked to him after the visit, said Alabama, really is the standard of college football, and we'll see how that goes. He's an extremely athletic kid. Plays on both sides of the ball. Had over 100 tackles as a junior, playing linebacker for the first year, and then had over 300 yards receiving. So he plays on both sides of the ball, but certainly going to be a linebacker at the next level.
That linebacker position is interesting for the recruitment. One, Alabama's going to be picky because they want guys they think can compete right away. But when you look at that depth chart, there's no fighting Bama's depth chart. They got all the upperclassmen. You got Jefferson, the Colorado kid. You got Lawson. You got those guys who will move on. And then you go to that second level where it's Caden, who everyone's really excited about. And then the freshman that came in, Duke, Luke, and who am I forgetting? Duke, Luke. Abdul. See, that didn't rhyme. That's why Abdul threw me off. But those, you have those guys, but you're kind of competing with guys more along your experience level when you come in as a freshman. So it's got to be appealing. For you that have stayed this long, a reminder, we will have a preview of next week's official visit list, which is going to be probably just, let me glance. It's probably a little better, right? It's probably a little better than this week's list. And this week's
it's a stacked list. I mean, I think they have 12 right now, including 3 Alabama commitments that are going to be in Tuscaloosa. So that's something that's pretty interesting, because they didn't have any Alabama commitments in this past weekend. They're going to have 2 on campus on June the 20th to kind of help recruit. But they're bringing in 3 guys this weekend to help recruit some of these other big names that are going to be on campus. And it's a big weekend with Xavier Griffin, Jaira Edwards in town, Kamari Brooks. So it's going to be an exciting weekend. You're going to have guys like Jordan Edmonds, Kamarion Johnson, and Jamarian Matthews, all Alabama commitments that are going to be helping.
And we'll preview this Thursday. We'll go down the list and kind of give you some of our expectations. We'll probably have a little more information on this week's visitors. You got to remember, they long trip home on Sunday. Some of the recruits told us they fell asleep, fell asleep on the ride home, which is normal. My kids hit the car, they all sleep. Jet Washington didn't even leave until Monday. So things will start to trickle down a little bit more. So be here. And again, we appreciate you. Give us that like and subscribe, and we will see you later in the week. Andrew Bone, tell them goodbye.
Goodbye. Come check us out at bamaonline.com, because that's where all of our information is every single day. And come talk to us on the BOL Roundtable.
Enjoy your week. Thank you.